Hi guys, this is Thersites of Athens, and today I'd like to look at players in the NBA who played on the same team as both Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant at some point in their career. And this video was ultimately sparked by a YouTube comment I saw that claimed that one of the players on this list is the only guy who holds that distinction. Well, I started thinking about it, and I did a little bit of research, and I've come up with 5 players who play with both Jordan and Bryant. And let me know if I missed anybody because I'm not a sports expert, so I don't know if I might have missed somebody by accident. So if I did, just let me know in the comments. But until then, I'd like to start running through these guys, so let's get started. When I was trying to think of other players who played on both teams, the first guy that came to mind was Ron Harper, who I believe is one of the most underrated role players of his age. Now, Harper was primarily a shooting guard. He was 6'6". He was built about like Michael Jordan. He was long and explosive and a very good defender. But when he went to the Bulls, he played point guard. When he was in his prime, which would have been in his days with the LA Clippers immediately preceding his move to the Bulls, he was about a 20-point, 5-assist, 5-rebound player. So he was one of the elite shooting guards in the league. But Clippers owner Donald Sterling, who's mostly known for being racist now, was also known for tanking at the time, and he wasn't willing to pay Harper what he was worth. So Harper decided to pursue championships instead and went to the Chicago Bulls, where there was an opening at the 2 because Michael Jordan was retired. Of course, later that season, that's when Jordan returned from retirement, and Harper moved to the 1 spot for the 1995-1996 season. When he was with the Bulls, he mostly only averaged about 7 points a game and a few assists, but he was useful because he was a strong player. He's strong in the post, a good defender. He stretched the floor out because he could shoot some, he could drive. But his main role was bringing the ball down the court and then passing to Jordan or Pippen. And also he was a really good defender. Not on the level of Jordan or Pippen, but he was pretty versatile. And he was a useful rotational player. When he went to the Lakers, he was mostly there to help Phil Jackson explain the triangle offense to a lot of the new guys like Kobe Bryant and Derek Fisher. And he would play in clutch situations. He was getting a little older by then. His knees were giving out. And he did a pretty good job. He also hit a number of key shots in the 1999-2000 playoffs. By the time the 2000-2001 season came around, it was his last season. And Bryant and some other people had really come into their own. And Harper was more or less just a very minor role player by that time. But he was still a veteran presence and somebody who was well liked on the team. So he was able to win 3 championships in Chicago with that second three-peat team, and then he won 2 championships with the Lakers. If he had stuck around for 1 more year, he would have had 3 rings with the Lakers as well. One of the guys who was one of the key components of the Bulls' first three-peat was Horace Grant. He was their power forward at the time, and he could also play center. He was the 10th pick in 1987 by the Chicago Bulls, and he was drafted just like Scottie Pippen as an auxiliary for Michael Jordan. Eventually that group grew up together and went on to do great things. During his prime, which was in his later years with Chicago, and then when he went to the Magic, and he went with Shaq and Penny to the 1995 finals, Grant was worth about 14 points and 10 rebounds a game. He was a very versatile player in terms of his ability to defend, rebound, and play a ton of minutes. The guy was known for his obsessive conditioning, and I think there were articles run back when I was a kid that would talk about how he only had 2% body fat and that he might have been the most physically fit player in the league. He's mostly a hustle guy. He didn't have a lot of finesse. He's not like a Kobe or a Michael in the sense that he can't really put the moves on anybody, but he was a very good player in his own right. He's a great addition to almost any squad. In Chicago, like I said, he was their hustle guy for the first three-peat. Obviously, he would be replaced by Rodman in the second squad. And on the Lakers in 2000-2001, he was brought in just like Ron Harper had been for the same reasons. He was familiar with Phil Jackson, and Phil Jackson liked to bring in veterans who had worked with him in the past, or just players who were known for having a high basketball IQ like Brian Shaw. So anyway, Horace Grant was, reasonably important on the 2000-2001 squad as a reserve. And then he's brought back, I guess, as a courtesy for the 2003 and 4 squad, where he played as the reserve for Karl Malone. And of course, that season fell apart in the finals against the Detroit Pistons. And by that point in his career, Horace Grant was more or less finished. His knees had been, completely shot, and he was just kind of done at that point, unfortunately. Although Dennis Rodman is by far the most famous player on the list that I've been able to assemble, he's by far the easiest to overlook because his time in LA was short. He only played with the Lakers during the 1998-1999 lockout shortened season. But let's look at Dennis Rodman. He was primarily a power forward. In a pinch, he could either play a small forward or center, but power forward is basically what he does, which is fairly impressive since he was only 6'7", and he wasn't in the same weight class as his most famous rival, Karl Malone. In his prime, partly when he was with the Bulls in their second three-peat and in the years immediately preceding that, he could score about 5 points a game, but he would add 16 rebounds, and I believe he had about 5 rebounding titles, which for a guy who's only 6'7" in a league which included a bunch of 7-footers like Hakeem Olajuwon and Shaquille O'Neal, that's actually very impressive. Now, he won 2 championships early in his career with the Detroit Pistons, but back then he was only scoring about maybe 8 points and 12 rebounds, so he wasn't quite at his best yet. And he didn't really come into his own until after the Pistons had passed their prime, when Isaiah was getting older and then went down with his Achilles. And then Dennis really took off. He played with San Antonio for a little while, went to the Bulls for the second three-peat. He was considered to be sort of the third member of their big three, Jordan, Pippen, Rodman. Although I think that Rodman was such a small part of that in terms of his offensive production that I would actually say it was the Jordan, Pippen, Kukoc show. But that's a discussion for a different day. His rebounding was obviously extremely influential, and it took a lot of the burden off of Jordan and Pippen, who could focus more on offense and just playing man-to-man defense on the elite wing players that they were guarding. He went to the Lakers for his second-to-last season. Like I said, it was the lockout-shortened season, 1998-1999. And the idea was to bring a veteran presence. Phil Jackson brought him in. Or actually, it was before Phil Jackson was the coach, so somebody else had the idea to bring in Rodman after the Bulls broke up. And despite being about 37 at the time, Rodman was still in excellent shape. He wasn't quite getting as many rebounds, but that's partly because Shaq was on the team and he was gobbling up rebounds. And Rodman didn't really stay healthy that year. And like I said, it was second to last season. He had one more season in Dallas, and that year he really didn't do well. But he did bring a lot of energy and determination to the Lakers in the 99 season, and I think that really helped them. And had he been healthy and had they been a serious contender, I think Rodman would have made a big difference and helped them a lot against a lot of the more veteran teams in the West. And now for the guy who's probably the least well-known of the players who played with both Jordan and Bryant, Tyronn Lue. Lue was drafted in 1998, so he came in about 2 years after Bryant, and he was also on the squad during the 99, 2000, 2001 championship years with LA. And he didn't really have a big role on the team. Obviously, there were a lot of talented young guards when he first came in. I think Van Exel was still on the team. Van Exel left. Derek Fisher was there developing, and Kobe was there. They brought in Brian Shaw. They had Ron Harper. They had a lot of guys who were better options than Tyronn Lue, who's only 6 feet tall. Now, Lue started to distinguish himself during the 2001 finals when the Lakers played the 76ers and their star Allen Iverson. Tyronn Lue would basically role play as Iverson since they were similar players in terms of size and their looks. So Iverson at the time was basically the terror of the league, and Tyronn Lue would simulate him. And the idea that Phil Jackson had is that the players in the Lakers got used to handling Iverson in practice, then they would be less intimidated by him on the court. And ultimately, when he was having trouble containing Iverson, who was smaller and quicker than other guys, he eventually put Lue on him, and Lue was able to reduce his efficiency and allow the Lakers to have a very easy win in the finals. That was his main claim to fame in LA. Then he went to Washington, where he played under Michael Jordan. So he went there right when Jordan came back, and he also got to play with the great Kwame Brown. And anyway, Tyronn Lue started coming to his own a little bit at that time. He went up to about 8 or 9 points a game rather than 3 or 4. He started getting a few assists. And because Jordan was out for a lot of games, he probably started a number of games at that time. and he did all right. He reached his peak in 2005-2006 with the Atlanta Hawks, which, interestingly enough, is the same year that Kobe Bryant had his best season. And Tyronn Lue in his best season, and the couple years around that, was averaging about 12 points and 4 assists with 2 rebounds. So, he was never a major player, but he had a very high basketball IQ, and he's currently an assistant coach on the Cleveland Cavaliers of LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Kyrie Irving. So maybe one day he'll be a head coach, and at any rate, it looks like he'll be going to the finals again this year as an assistant coach, because let's face it, the East is pretty watery right now. Last and most certainly least is Kwame Brown. So the post I read where the guy was talking about how Kwame Brown's only distinction as an NBA player was the fact that he was able to play with both Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, drove me to investigate this issue in the first place, and needless to say, that person was extremely wrong. So, Kwame Brown, he was a center for the most part. He could also play power forward, but he's mostly a center because of his height. He came straight out of high school, and he was drafted by none other than Wizards owner Michael Jordan right before he decided to come out of retirement and rejoin the NBA as a member of the Wizards. Kwame Brown is almost certainly the worst first overall pick if you count players who didn't just injure out immediately and actually got playing time. Then he's definitely the biggest draft bust. In his prime, and I should have put prime in parentheses, but quotation marks, because it's pretty relative, I guess. Kwame reached astounding heights of 8 points a game and 6 rebounds. And that was during his last couple years with the Wizards after Jordan was gone, and then his first couple years in LA before he got benched because Bynum started to make progress. He really was a disappointment. Michael hasn't really said much about him, and apparently holds no grudge because he signed him once he became the owner of the Charlotte Bobcats, and Kwame Brown played a little bit there. Kobe, in interviews, has been asked about his time playing with guys like Kwame Brown and Smush Parker while he was in his prime, averaging 35 a night. And he said that one time he offered to pass the ball to Kwame for a key play, and then Kwame Brown said, "Please don't pass it to me, I'll miss." So, Kwame Brown, pretty big bust, and it is amazing that he managed to play on the teams of the 2 most competitive players of all time and not get murdered by one of them. So I have to give my, respect to him in that regard. I guess because the fact that he's 7 feet and almost 300 pounds was his best protection against, the much smaller Michael and Kobe. So anyway, also, if you've never seen it, just go to YouTube and look up the Bill Walton and Stephen A. Smith takedown of Kwame Brown, because it tells you everything you need to know about this guy. So anyway, that is my video of the 5 players who played with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant at some point in their careers. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will probably be doing more videos of this type, even though my mainstay is still talking about political issues and historical issues, which I need to start working on in the near future. But I'm not opposed to doing things that are sports related, as long as it relates to the NBA, which is really the only branch of professional sports that I bother keeping up with. So until next time, this has been Thersites of Athens, and I will see you around on the internet.